So, welcome back. We continue with Mayte Gomez Molina. So happy you're here. Looking forward to your presentation.
Hello, thank you for having me here. I'm actually very happy I just arrived in Germany 6 months ago, so also to come this far up is actually very exciting. The train ride was fun. So I come from Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. I am originally from Spain, from the south, from Granada. And I'm working as academic researcher in a research group called Code Secret. And this is my own personal research, which is connected to the group, but also to my personal artistic and writing practice that is called You Can and You Can't See Me Through My Avatar, Camouflage Protection and Resistant Techniques in 3D and VR in Contemporary Art. Long title, maybe it should be shorter. So at COSE, we study mostly coded artwork, so works that deal with programming and that are withdrawn from networks in different ways. For example, in my part, which I am less of a programming or technical person in that sense, I don't know. I can read code, but I don't know how to write it. So I'm more about, for example, performances that happen, hijacking pre-existing applications. For example, people who have built a slave plantation in Minecraft to talk about like how, for example, people were enslaved by Portuguese colonial practices, and they build these environments in Minecraft. So you don't have to know how to code and do 3D to go into an application and actually build a resistance or a protest artwork. So I'm interested in that, but in the group in general, we look at programming pieces that are like withdrawn from the internet because they are outdated, or an actualization or an updating of the code made it impossible for people to see, or maybe they are like something is hidden in the code by the artist, or they wanted to intentionally be hidden in another platform. So we're looking at how digital art is very hard to grasp, but you can make it harder to grasp if you want and become invisible and powerful through camouflage in a sense. So I'm an artist and a writer, and my practice starts with video art. I use poetry, and I felt very connected to Hannah Seitz, maybe I'm saying her last name wrong, last night when she talked about poetry as a proxy and as a layer to separate yourself from trauma. I am going to talk about 3D and VR in marginalized groups, so feminist, queer, racialized, or black people, brown people, indigenous people, using it as a way of protection, but I am not black. I'm also not trans, and personal information, I usually have male partners, so I'm not read as queer. So I come from a space of respect, because I'm not trying to build queer theory, and I'm not trying to build black theory or indigenous theory. I come from an experience of oppression within my body, knowing that I'm at the basis of oppression. I'm the most basic layer, and I had my share of crap, unfortunately, like everybody else. So I had an eating disorder for 17 years of my life, and I was very sick. And I was also victim of gender violence. So in my work, it took me a long time to be able to approach these subjects directly because it's traumatic. So through 3D, I discovered a layer or a proxy between myself and my story. And I started to explore how that allowed me to not be so afraid or scared to relive what I went through. Because at the end, I was using other bodies that I could also help to represent dissociation and body dysmorphia, which is different from gender dysphoria, but they do share a lot of things, and I do feel connected to the community in that way, that I know what it is to look at the mirror and not recognize yourself and suffer profoundly from that, from a different point of view, or of course, gender reaffirmation or gender performance. So for me, it was useful to tell people how my body suffered so many changes and how I saw myself in the mirror, and to explain to people that you hallucinate when you have an eating disorder, and it's very hard for other people to grasp what is happening. So suddenly in avatars, I found a way to communicate those feelings, and through the use of avatars, I felt empowered to then do real life performances with my mother, and I made a documentary film that maybe I can share if anybody's interested, about the eating disorder in relationship to my mother, because my mom works at home. She worked taking care of my family. which is not seen as work, unfortunately, but it is a 24-hour job for the rest of your life. And with my eating disorder, it was the relationship who suffered the most because she was the one who provided food, and she was the one who I rejected most. Through reenactment and also avataring, but in analog way, we could meet again and talk about trauma and a feminist approach to how mothers have to be forgiven, and when we forgive mothers, we also forgive ourselves in a way. So in this paper that is like complementary, I think, to my artistic practice, I'm trying to like find power in how a lot of people is using 3D to talk about their traumatic experiences, because it is already hard enough to talk directly about what has hurt you. It is very painful. And sometimes your audience is also going to be triggered by the stories you are telling. So in a way, it's a double movement of protection. I mean, you can also get very aggressive and realistic with violence in VR and 3D because it's also very immersive. But I was a very hard and radical trans activist in Spain for a very long time, and I went like against those who hurt us and my communities, but and I still do, but I also found power in creating dialogue and caring of one another, because we already, have to crush so much against people who hurt us repeatedly. So I also feel in tenderness and in compassion and dialogue within the groups. We need to talk, because if we always fight, I mean, it is necessary to resist, but at the same time we resist by being together and building community. So I thought this is also important in the piece we are going to see. So the methodology I'm using, and there's some limitations that I will discuss later, is that 3D and VR are, and this is a Willem Flasser term, which I find very interesting. They are devices in the sense that they are not machines. They produce reality. Like they copy how we perceive the world, and then they can create real life experiences. So if I insult you on the internet, you're gonna be just as hurt as if I insult you on the street. Or if you cannot represent yourself correctly, or somebody uses your image on the internet and, with sexual images, we see this a lot, you're going to be hurt just as it was real life. So we cannot say that real life is non-digital. Like digital is also real life. We're all day with a phone in our hand. So we cannot say that 3D and VR are not real and therefore not able to produce experience in our hearts. Which I think is important for our life in general, but also in art, that you can relate to someone's experience without having to reenact it as a person or saying directly. So this idea of the proxy through the avatars as a representational tool that allow the artist to come closer to their story by separating. So it's a paradoxical move that I find very inspiring, that you come close by taking distance of your body with the avatar. And then I will talk about especially the overview of the pieces that convey this. So for me, the real and not real binary does not apply anymore. We can say tangible, non-tangible, out of a screen or in a screen, but I don't think that that line is so rigid anymore, and it's porous, and things cross boundaries, and we experience our life so much in our phones and computers that it's hard to say that you will not be hurt or you will not be able to obtain real knowledge from an online or virtual experience, which I think we can do. So in the 90s, Pierre Levy wrote a very beautiful book called Becoming Virtual, and he said the virtual has effects, and this is a very simple sentence, but we need to really think about this, because, for example, now with bullying at the schools, we see that it has gotten way worse, because before kids, unfortunately, were terrorized from 9 to 3, and now they are terrorized all day and on the weekends because you have a phone and you're always connected and you're always reachable. So there's no place to hide. So how do we hide in these spaces? For me, it's through usernames and avatar using. And it's very, it is actually a little hard, and I was talking with Carmen about that, because since this is all developing so quickly, it's hard to find theory building that is addressing certain topics. Like in new media, we have Mark Hansen from 2000, 2010, we have a lot of books, but so many things are happening that it's so hard to keep track of theory making. So sometimes it's hard to have, and that's one of the limitations I think as new media researchers we will find in our practice, that sometimes you have to go back to think about the present and the future. And for me, this was amazing. This is a text by Oliver Wendell Holmes, that was the inventor of this version of the stereoscope, that was a proto-cinematic device of 3D and VR. And it's from the 19th century. And he said that by this instrument, when you see reality, the effect of reality is so heightened that produces an appearance of reality which cheats the senses with its seeming truth. So it was able to replace reality. Already this man was pointing out how by separating, because what happens with VR is that you see two images, but because of the way our eyes are built, they cross and they produce depth, an image of depth. And therefore, with depth and tactility, there comes a quality of reality. Because at the end, and this is something also important to talk about, it is that vision actually, it is a plural sense state. So you don't see things and you just see things. You see things and so many things get triggered in your brain because we don't see with our eyes, we see with our brain. So everything is connected and it's a very powerful tool for the worst entertainment, VR, for example, in the use of mainstream violent porn, or just entertainment that condemns and like kind of perpetuates representational issues for women and other social groups. But it's also very powerful when you want to tackle good things. And I think that artists that I will show are very good at doing them. And to prove how powerful vision is, and in this text by Masumi, you can find a lot of information if you're interested on the topic. If I show you this image, you have never maybe touched this particular surface, but you can infer what it feels like. If I show you this image, you know what it feels like. You don't have to actually touch it, you're touching with your eyes. So the idea that there's a tactile quality in vision that also brings like depth and volume to our experience when we see an image, even if it's more in VR because it has depth, this is something very interesting that I think builds this idea of 3D as able to mimic reality. And something very important is that we think that new media is very far away from the body, but in reality it's not, because it doesn't have a materiality, so it needs us, it needs our body to exist. So it's very physical, and it's like very paradoxical, and I think that the technology industry like kind of makes this like even more far away from us, because they say the cloud, the blah, blah, blah. It's everything so ethereal and kind of like godlike and religion-like, but it is actually servers that deal a lot of it, like take a lot of electricity away from energy supplies, and they are buildings in cities where you have the servers. So this is all super physical, and it needs our physicality to exist, because it's like we become a medium for the media, because we are like, like the mediums that like call in the ghost, so you're calling the ghost of new media through you, and that's how it gets to exist. I think all art needs your body to exist, but in new media is probably a little more specific. So there's an amazing scientific article I found that they show a 3D chimpanzee to a real-life chimpanzee, and the 3D animation was yawning, which is known for being something that triggers, like it's contagious between humans and other animal species, non-human animal species that are able to self-recognize and recognize others. And they discovered that when the chimpanzee saw the 3D yawning chimpanzee, they reacted and they also copy it. So there's a real effect, and it's very funny because in this article they say, well, only half of the humans shown a human that yawning in 3D responded, and that is not like a good sample of information. I thought, well, half of the people is a lot of people from a study, but also they kind of said that this happened because it wasn't hyper-realistic enough. And I understand that, because humans, like our brains, are a little harder to deceive. But we do emphasize with fictional displays of behavior. I mean, I don't know if you have seen any Pixar's movie lately, but it's very hard that they make you cry. Like when you see Up, this is like mainstream animation for children, but it is so hard to suddenly jump in to like love someone or have a feeling for someone or feel sad or happy for someone, even if they are a representational animated character. And this is, there's a concept from literature called the principle or hyperprotected cooperation, which says that when we are faced with fiction, we just prove to believe fiction. If not, literature and art cannot happen, and fiction cannot happen, because if I'm watching a film and I think, oh, this is not real, then what's the use of a film? So we kind of like drop our capacity or idea of what is real and what is not, to believe that those characters exist and to feel with them. And that's why fiction is powerful. But other than that, maybe these monkeys, these 3D monkeys weren't like very hyper-realistic, and we couldn't like really tell. But this is from 2021, 12 years later. I will actually find, I mean, this is a 3D avatar. This is from the, this is connected to Carmen. What she uses is Unreal Engine, which is a graphic motor for video game design, which is free to use under, if you don't make so much money, like it's free to download. If you have a computer that can take it, as Unity motor is as well, you can take it for free in your computer, you can download it. These are avatars. You can, as you see, choose absolutely every feature of your face. This is very spooky. Like if you try just to see how you feel, I don't know if you have heard of uncanny valley feeling. That was coined by a Japanese researcher, but it's the idea that you get scared that something that is not human is so human after all, because your own existence gets a little challenged. So I don't know, if I saw one of these yawning, I probably would yawn too, because they look like real people, like they existed. So now, as the technology is getting like better and better, it's going to be harder and harder to say, oh no, we cannot empathize, or we cannot respond to avatars because they are not real. I mean, this is more real than me. I mean, it's very, is quite difficult. But this software needs like a lot of expertise. So to build something and put it in Unreal or to bring it into Blender is not so easy. So for example, this is one software that will allow people to represent themselves as they want, even for example with black hair, which we see there in the corner. That is, as I will discuss later, like very hard for black people or brown people to represent their hair the way they want, because hair is very difficult in 3D, but black hair is like not introduced in 3D until very recently, so 2 years ago. So the idea of avatar, this is very beautiful, because until I started doing more strict research, I didn't know that it came from the Sanskrit avatara, that means to descend, and was in Hinduism that believed that Vishnu could descend to the world and take a human form or an animal form or a form that humans could understand to then like deliver the messages. So it's very funny that usually in art, when somebody uses a mask or we say persona, we say alter ego, we don't say an avatar. An avatar is this idea of we are gods like descending into the internet, which is another world to deliver a message. It's an interesting idea if we think about it thoroughly. But they are never fixed identities, and they are very important, not only because I represent myself the way I want, if they let me, which we will discuss later, is that we usually use avatars in relation to others. That's why they are so important, because you will see me as I want to define myself. If I was alone in the internet, they probably wouldn't be, they will be important, but not in the same level. So through an avatar, something that really interested me and I exploring in the film with my mom is that, well, something that made me make the film is that my mom said, when I wear the masks, nobody sees me, but everybody's looking at me. And for me, in feminine, especially housework, that is very invisible. This was like a will of my mother to be seen, even though she didn't know how to ask for that attention, or the world didn't give her that attention. So it's this idea of, if I'm very visible, I might get hurt. I might be made fun of. I might be said, oh, you're just a housewife, or you're a trans woman, or, like so many things are on top of your image when you show yourself, that sometimes it's easier to protect yourself, but still be visible. And there I think the avatar and the mask and the alter ego are very important. And this is something that I will talk in 3D and VR, but we know, for example, like Adrian Smith or Lynch Herman Neeson, like they were also using personas from before. They were using avatars to like talk about their art in the 70s and the 80s. So, or Cindy Sherman or Nan Golding. So this is not new. It's just, it has a different shape now. So the problem is that when we can represent ourselves in a society driven by images, then we exist. If we cannot represent ourselves the way we want, we don't exist, or we don't exist like we want. And probably, not probably, like what happens, and this is like transferred to the digital, because humans just like perpetuate their shit through everything they do. So it's not like we're free, unfortunately. But trans representation, queer representation, racial representation has always been a problem, and now it's just transferred. We cannot think, oh, the digital is the, everything is solved. As we see, like you have to be a size 0 to fit in a motion capture suit. So of course, if you're fat, if you're queer, if you're black, you're gonna have problems to represent yourself. It is very difficult. And sometimes you get imposed your identity. It is not possible to choose who you are, especially if you're not a 3D designer, and a lot of people don't have the level of expertise necessary to design their avatar just as they want. So it is very difficult, and it's important to make commentaries on that. So as I'm a 3D artist, sometimes I go to warehouses, are places where I can buy or freely download 3D avatars. And I mean, most people who design avatars are men, straight men. So when I saw this, I was just outraged, like, what the fuck is this? Like, I don't know, like, why don't there are legs? Or, it's just like the basic things. Like, it's good that they gave us eyes, but, it's like the mouth, the breast, and, which is awful. It's an awful image, but this happens. Like, I mean, it's probably a joke, but it's a very hurtful joke, especially when you're the one who is represented. And this is, for example, in CG Trader, which is a very famous page to download avatars and buy avatars. And as you see, if an alien were to come to the Earth and just see this and type woman, I don't know, like bags, gigantic breast, no black women, a lot of Asian fetishized women, and adult content. So it is very hard to exist as you want because others choose your identity for you. And in this book by Elizabeth Gross, which is very beautiful, is that, and for me this is about intersectionality, and is where I base, and when I said the bodies have my basis of what I believe intersection can do for us, is that because my body precedes myself when I enter a space, if that happens to you, we can meet and talk about it. Because if I feel fear by walking on the street because I'm going to be raped or I'm going to be violated by someone, and of course I am white. I mean, I'm Spanish, but I'm white, so I will be reading as white, and I'm like I'm a potential oppressor as well as other people. But still, I will be, my body, or if somebody finds me sexually attractive, or just because my body is sexualized in every representational media we have, I will be read differently. And if you're black, you will be read as black. And then it doesn't matter if you're like color blue or if you like horseback riding, no, because the first information you have is that you're black, and then a lot of stereotypes will come from that. And it also happens with, especially I think, trans women and trans men, but also with queer folks. So this, for example, is when you type women, I mean, this is what you see. Like, if you are, for example, a teenager, there's a lot of very like crafty teenagers that know a lot about 3D, and they just go into these places and download things. This is what they're going to find. So much like adult content, and for example, this search I conducted on Monday, and the first black women that appear was in page 4. So until if you give up on your search on page 3, there's no black women, no indigenous women, and no Hispanic women either, or from other Asian races that are not white, like Korean looking. So yeah, it's, we don't only think that these characters are alive, but we feel emotional relations to the characters. And this is very hurtful. For example, this is a representation of a sexual worker from Grand Theft Auto. That is this infamous game in which you drive around and you kill people and you pay prostitutes, like sexual workers for their work sometimes, and sometimes you rape them, which is an awful game which a lot of people play, and now is multiplayer and you can go online. So this is how a sexual worker is represented, which is not true in many cases. Some people is obligated to sex work, but some people choose to sex work. And the idea is that, for example, the stereotype of the sex worker is someone who has been like somebody like hit her, like she has been violated, and also she looks like she has some kind of problem with substance abuse, like as we see like a lot of people who use methamphetamines from marginal foregrounds. They have like skin marks and they will look like this. So this is what a lot of people is thinking of sexual workers, and at the end of women as well, whether they're queer or not queer. So the idea of the avatar is that I feel that when I see an avatar, what happens to them could happen to me because their body is connected to my body. Like I have hands, or I have, like skin. I know, I mean, also when I see a representation of another person due to this empathetic response of representation of human or even non-human forms. But the avatar is a way to connect with, this could happen to me, or this shouldn't happen to anybody. And I think that in the artists we're going to see, this is quite important, and I feel very compassionate and very generous from them. So the first example I found of this topic is from 2008, and this is by Mayte Gomez. She's a trans woman, poet, researcher from, I think, a university in California now, I don't remember the name. But in this performance called Becoming a Dragon, which is also accompanied by a text you can download online, is free of access, she performed 365 hours in Second Life, which is a proto VR social media space where you had an avatar, like The Sims 4, for example, like the video game The Sims, but it was online and you could talk to other people. So it was a social media platform. And what she did is that for gender reaffirmation surgeries, still in many, many places in the world, you have to spend 1 year living as your desired gender, your target gender, to be allowed to even enter the waiting list for gender reassignment surgery. So what she did is that she lived 365 hours in Second Life as a dragon, like making this metaphor of like, oh, I have to live this time as a dragon in Second Life so they will allow me to be a dragon. Before I cannot be. And I think that this happens also with Carmen's work, and for me, mixed reality is important because at the end she's pointing at how in VR, because she didn't take the headset off for only to the bathroom and like sleep a little bit, but how she's perceiving herself, she's seeing herself as what she chose to be, a dragon, but the rest of people is still seeing her as she cannot control to be. So I think this is interesting, especially in the experience of trans people, that their identity or the way they are read depends on others, on the power of others to assign you like a medical treatment or hormonal treatment or a gender reaffirmation surgery, which, I mean, they are adults, they know what they're doing, and you know, they shouldn't be like questioned like that. Then we have Sandra Perry, which is an amazing artist from the United States. And in this work, she has a 3D avatar of herself, but as you see that the face is a little like weirdly pasted into the avatar, and it's because she had to project a picture of her face into an avatar she found because it was impossible for her to find a fat avatar. As you have seen in the women search that we did in CG Trader, there's no fat women. In the world of the internet, there's only very big breasts, but no other like bigness around. So she had a lot of problems like finding an avatar for herself. And even if her pieces, for example, this piece talks about self-exploitation in a capitalist environment, but she's also making commentaries on how hard it is for her to represent her skin and represent the body she occupies in the world. Just, you know, like fatness is eliminated from the digital, which is a very interesting theme as well. And in this art piece, I cannot play it all because it's 17 minutes long, so it will be difficult to play. But this is online on YouTube, you can see it. Like many of the pieces I'm going to show, unfortunately, you can only find information because they are part of galleries or the artists like don't like release the content. But in this piece, this is her brother talking. Her body was a player for the University League of the United States, which is like the what you have before NBA, so where people get picked. And they found out that EA Sports, that is like, for example, EA Games is like for The Sims 4, you know, like it's a very big video game company. They found out that they stole their identity to make the University League video game without asking for their consent. So that avatar was him, but he wasn't asked for consent to be an avatar or to be in the game. Neither anybody from his team or other teams around the United States. So they started a lawsuit, and what happened is that black players got paid less than white players. Like something based on something very stupid like playing time. I'm not 100% sure of how they justified such bullshit, but they did. And what is super interesting of her work, and I think that she's super interesting artist, is that then she goes with her brother to the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and they are watching the 3D collection of now 3D scans of a lot of pieces from the Metropolitan Museums that were stolen from other cultures and countries. So it's this idea of stealing identities, stealing objects of importance of cultures that are not yours, and then you show in these museums as a neutral space, but they are, of course, not neutral. And this is an interesting video because also you can see her talking about it. So it's an hour-long artist talk, and I think this, yeah, I don't have time to show, but it's very interesting. Also, we have Jacoby Satterwhite, who is a gay man that builds these amazing, beautiful fantasy VR worlds where you can see him in 2D, you can see representations of himself and of black culture in 3D, and it's like this voguing world, so it's very connected to Vogue and to a very like celebrating of blackness and queerness environment, but it's also yeah, these spaces of reflection and of meeting for queer and black cultures. And then he did. Oops. This is his last work, I think, and this is a festival that you can go on VR, and all the songs that play on the festival are the lyrics are from his mom, who has schizophrenia, and he created this amazing electronic music, and then you can go to different places and you can see representations of black culture, of pop culture. You can see himself as an avatar, so you see this like multiplicity of the self, which allows him to talk about, what it is to have a mother with a mental illness, what it is to be a black person with a mental illness, what is to be a body that can be coded as female, non-binary, as male. So in this way, avatars allow you to have so much freedom over how you comment on yourself and the things you desire to portray about yourself. And it's a space of celebration of his mother and of voguing culture and queer black culture. Then we have a little different example from American artists. Maybe this plays, or maybe this doesn't play. Well, it's okay. It's called If I'm Blue, If I Was, I Will Die, and the part in black is actually blue. And we have this is just a part of an installation, and we see this character that is a metaphorical representation of blue as police blue from the United States, and he's talking about police violence and like how they cannot help to be that way because power is very difficult to approach, and so kind of justifying himself from being violent towards other people. So here, this is an interesting example because you don't only get to represent yourself through avatars, you can also represent other people you love and other people who have hurt you. And in a way, make commentaries about their behavior in a protected environment. Because at the end, if you take a cop and you record a cop from the United States, you will go to jail, automatically within a week. But if you make a metaphorical analogy through an avatar, because avatars and animations are cartoons, for children not important, nobody's going to care. So there's a very interesting way of escaping censorship through avatars that is also quite interesting. I won't play this because we don't have time, but there's also La Junelle Macmillan that is building a library on black movement. So after Black Lives Matter, she built this black library movement, which have the same initials, and they perform outside a museum. I think it was in Washington, D.C., but I'm not 100% sure. And she called upon a lot of black performers, and they dance, and they store that movement inside of a library, and people can consult it. This is also Zach Blas, who is a queer artist from the United States. And this is actually, I think this is 3D printed, but there's an augmented reality face filter by which you are unreadable by biometric devices. So if you were to wear this in a dystopian world in which, not so dystopian, people get biometrically, especially following, for example, airports and some governmental offices, especially in the United States, after 9/11 with the shock and everybody kind of allow for more surveillance. So he built this so queer people couldn't be identified at airports. So it's this idea is a speculation design. But if you were going to be seen through a surveillance camera wearing this, they wouldn't know what points of your face are important, and then the machine couldn't store your information. So it was a way of protecting this masking through image. I'm going to go directly to Lu Yang. Lu Yang is a very interesting case because she has become very famous. I think she had a recent exhibition at Frankfurt, so she's becoming very popular in Europe. And Lu Yang does these motion capture performances. I think they are a non-binary artist from China, which this is very interesting because in China it's actually very hard to live as a queer person, but also as a non-binary person, even harder, a trans person. So what they do is that they build, I don't know why I can play the video. Let me see if this will work. No, okay, no. Now this will be very fun. It doesn't let me play. Well, I'm sorry, I can't. Oh, now. Okay. So as you see, they have this avatar that now they are expanding on, and they were vocal. invite you to see their website. It's pretty trippy, amazing.
I want you.
No, again, no. So then we have also Martin Gutierrez. This is a pitchy, but it's not available online anymore, but it's a VR space. You have a real film of Martin Gutierrez, who is a indigenous, Latin, non-binary, trans person, and they are talking about like playing this bombshell persona as a way to like talk about male desire and male violence towards trans women. And it was interesting because even though it's analog video, it was in a VR space where they had built like a dollhouse that you can go and like kind of follow your own path. So it was interesting in that regard. Then we have Martina Menegon, who is a artist from Portugal. And they do this like repetition of the self until the self becomes something that is like consumable or like taking their humanity away from them. And I think this is very interesting, like feminist commentary on the use of images, like repeated images of women, and until the point that you lose your identity or it dilutes so much that it's hard to see yourself or other women as human beings, because there's like I don't know, like a male disease in our gaze that sometimes makes us see ourselves and others through those eyes. And it's something we have to constantly fight against. This is also a piece of hers, but out of time I won't play. This is Anneli Goller. They were my teacher at MFA I did in Chicago, in the School of the Institute of Chicago. And I invite you to see their work, but I have to say that this work is not protecting the viewer, so it's very triggering and it narrates abuse, sexual abuse. So if you have any kind of trigger or sensibility towards that, maybe approach it with knowing that what will happen. This is very violent piece, even though it's super beautiful, all made of crystal, and you know her voice is, their voice is very soft, but they talk about, like, they describe the experience of a rape, so it's pretty strong. This is one of the cases that I wanted to include as a variation of the idea of protection, because I don't think they were also protected while talking about this. Is very harsh, as the film, for example, we saw yesterday, but in a way it's also liberating. And then I have my own work, but I'm not so good as the other work, so maybe you just can see on my website if you're interested. And yeah, we also have Carrie Chen, which is a Chinese born by US-raised women who like did all her like temporal, like to the right, no, to the left is the US, her US self, or the possibilities of being within the US, and on the right is what Chinese women would. Oh, sorry, I forget. So to the left is Carrie, presented as she was raised in the U.S. So what kind of women she can be as a Chinese woman living in the United States, and to the right is her Chinese version. So it's very interesting of her like exploring all the possibilities from childhood to old age of what it means to live within two cultures, and how that like made her persona, because at the end she's in the middle. And I think that this piece is like projected into a huge wall and is very, very powerful. So I think it's good that as a Chinese or Asian descent woman, she can represent herself in other ways that are not sexualized, highly sexualized, as we have seen from the pictures and the 3D objects that are offered by 3D male designers. And this is also a VR piece about the Guatemalan exile from the from Guatemala during the 2018. This is online by Alfredo Salazar Caro. We cannot like spend a lot of time on it. But it's talking about how, due to, I mean, now here it doesn't play, but on YouTube, on your computer, it will be like a VR setting, and you can look around like a 360 video. And this jaguar being represents a girl who is talking about her beautiful country, and then her beautiful country gets exploited and burned by internal wars caused by colonization and decolonization. So I think that there's a lot of limitation because of private material and ubiquity of the practice, because it's all over social media, and sometimes, you know, I cannot travel to the US to see a piece. I'm not rich, so I cannot do that. And sometimes it's a little hard to find a way to portray to others, but even though like in their websites, if you wrote down the names, or if you write me an email, I can send you the names. So I think that is the avatar is a tool for protection that we can all use. Well, we can choose it to attack others. We can use it to be very blunt about ourselves, but we can also use it to protect ourselves and others, and build community and dialogues through the use of the body. That is where we all can meet, because we all have a felt experience, and it's a way to start making politics about. So thank you so much. If you are interested in writing me an email, this is my website, so thank you.
Thank you, Mayte. This was very interesting and very complex. Are there any questions to Mayte? We are a little bit late in time, but we have some time for questions. All overwhelmed? Oh, give me a second.
Yeah, I want to say thank you first and foremost. This was very fast, very precious and beautiful and interesting information, worthy information. And you said you were happy to share a link. So that means if I write you an email, you will share info and links. I have to really do my best to find again the names and all the things.
If you write me an email, I will give you all the information and the sources too, like the bibliography I'm using, which I think is important because there's so little information that we have to circulate it around. So for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more? Yeah.
Hi, so first of all, thank you very much. It was super interesting. For me, just the word avatar is something I've only seen in glitch feminism, and I was wondering the way the avatar is used in that seems to be very similar in the way that you explained it, but maybe you can go more into that, how it's connected.
Yeah, to glitch feminism, you mean, for example, like Legacy Russell and all that theory?
Yeah.
Well, I think that, for example, Sondra Perry's work could be connected to glitch feminism because at the end she's talking about how avatars are glitching and she has to build this not so believable avatar because she cannot find an avatar of herself. So I think that the point of connection is that where is strong is that representation glitches in a way that is hurtful for most people who cannot represent themselves, but at the same time, it can be used as power to say, hey, I cannot represent myself. So of course, there's a lot of parts that are shared, and I really admire her work and is cited on the, quoted on the article, so thank you for the question. But I think it's about disruption, right? I think at the end, for example, yesterday, the verb queering was discussed, or the word glitch feminism, or this at the end is talking about, hey, I found a crack on the system because there's so many cracks on the systems due to representation because we're just transporting our bad habits into the internet. And in that idea, you make the system glitch too because it can become that you can also change politics if someone make an artwork about this strong enough, a very important artist with enough audience. It could cause, for example, CG traders to say, oh my God, there's no women, black women represented on the first page. So actually glitch can fix, and I think that's important. And in that way, I think it is connected to what I'm trying to present here.
Okay, I think we do not have any more questions. We would have time for another question, or we just go into our lunch break. Perhaps one more thing, for the students, they will, Colby Satterwhite, he will have an exhibition in Deichtorhallen in the summer. So for our students, it would be good to perhaps to check that out. And yeah, thank you, Mayte, for these insights into your work, your research, and also the examples how avatars can be used in the future or artistically.
Thank you so much for listening and being here.